Hello friends, welcome to Sriram's. The topic for today's discussion is Time Use Survey, What, Why and How. What is a time use survey? A time use survey is a statistical survey which aims to report data on how, on average, people spend their time. The objective is to identify, classify and quantify the main types of activity that people engage in during a defined time period, example, a year. Data of the surveys are used for calculation of unpaid work done by women as well as men. National Statistical Office, which is a wing of the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation, has conducted time use survey in India during January to December 2019 for the first time. Why do we conduct TUS? The Time Use Survey or TUS enables measuring time spent by individual on different activities. The primary objective of Time Use Survey is to measure the participation of men, women, and other groups of persons in paid and unpaid activities. The survey is an important source of information on the time spent in unpaid caregiving activities, unpaid volunteer work, unpaid domestic activities of the household members. It also provides information on time spent on learning, socializing, leisure activities, self-care activities, etc. by the household members. How is data on time spent classified? The International Classification of Activities for Time Use Statistics of the United Nations Statistics Division was used for classification of activities. This survey covered 140,000 households, out of which 83,000 households were rural and 57,000 households were urban. Information on time use was collected from each member of age 6 years and above of the selected households. The survey covers the whole of the Indian Union except villages in Andaman and Nicobar Islands which are difficult to access. Is the TUS linked to Sustainable Development Goals? Yes. SDG 5.4 says, recognize and value unpaid care and domestic work through the provision of public services, infrastructure, and social protection policies. Also, promote shared responsibility within the household and the family. It has two components. First, measuring and valuing unpaid domestic services and unpaid care by women and men. And second, reducing unpaid work through public services and infrastructure. In other words, it may mean basic income transfers to men and women for their unpaid work. TUS for the first time in India provides data for the inclusive public policy. The data is useful for valuing the labor input in unpaid work using suitable prices, minimum wages of workers, housekeepers' wages, opportunity costs, etc. What is the resolution of the International Labour Organization about the definition of work? The ILO's resolution presents a new definition of work, new forms of work, and a new labour force status classification. It defines work as any activity performed by persons of any sex and age to produce goods or provide services for use by others or own use. Unpaid domestic services and unpaid care are formally recognized as work for the first time. What are some findings of the TUS? As much as 38.2% of persons who were of the age of 6 years or above were engaged in employment and related activities in the country in 2019. As per the study, 57.3% males were engaged in employment and related activities, while the proportion was 18.4% for females in the country. In the rural areas, the proportion of women engaged in employment and related activities was higher at 19.2% compared to 16.7% in cities. The proportion of males above the age of 6 years engaged in gainful employment or related activities was higher in cities as 59.8% as compared to 56.1% in the rural areas. Overall, 53.2% of the participants in the survey were engaged in unpaid domestic services for household members. The proportion of females in the category was higher at 81.2% compared to 26.1% for males. The proportion of females engaged in unpaid domestic services for household members in rural areas was higher at 82.1% compared to 79.2% in the cities. What about culture and socialization? The proportion of people who opted for culture, leisure, mass media, and sports practices was 87% in the country. It also showed that people utilize 50% of total time in a day on self-care and maintenance, followed by 11.4% on employment and related activities. What is the use of the data for public policy? It can be used for designing employment and education policy, setting minimum wages, universal basic income, creating more cultural facilities, policies for gender parity, etc. Well, that's all for today. I hope you enjoyed today's podcast.